The name of the show is The Way to Go. My name is Alan Bendich. I'm going to be your host, tonight's guest. Well, actually, tonight's guest is me, and my father's going to be asking me some questions. So Max Bendich is my guest tonight.
Mr. Bendich.
So I guess you were going to ask me questions about what?
No, seriously, about Hollywood.
Hollywood, okay.
Hollywood. And before that, I want to explain how I went to Hollywood.
Right.
It's unbelievable. And you never told me about things like that. That when we came into Hollywood, we came to California, and we went down, and I saw a lot of policemen standing there, and I went over to them, and I didn't realize they all had New York, and I said,
uniforms, right.
Uniform. And I said, please, how do you get this way? And Mom was with me at that time,
Right.
a full truckload of clothes. How do you get from here to there? And they're laughing. They said to me, we're not policemen. I said, I'm talking to you. We're not policemen. You see that man sitting over there? He's the only policeman there. But again, Alan,
Right.
it never occurred to me. Here we are, and you are working in Hollywood.
Right.
I would like you, we never talked about this.
Well, we did, but I don't mind talking about it again.
No, about this,
Okay.
about this. How was it a week before
Okay. The week before what?
that you got the job
At the Hollywood Palace?
At the Hollywood Palace?
Okay.
Well,
Well, let me tell you what the Hollywood Palace was like, what it was. The Hollywood Palace was an $8 million renovation of a Hollywood landmark that Jerry Lewis used to have his television show on, and a lot of famous people. Judy Garland had television shows broadcast from over there. And what they did is they gutted the entire theater, and they renovated it, and they made it a nightclub, and it became a cabaret. And it was going to open up on Halloween night, 1982. So October 31st, 1982 was the opening night, and Tina Turner was going to be the show. Okay. So anyway, I'm not going to say a week before it started. I applied for. I was a bartender in New York. Before I was going to college, and I was a bartender in New York. Once I got to Hollywood and I'd done some filming, I was looking for a job that I could get regular money, that I could work a few nights a week and make a lot of money. So I started applying to all the bars on the Hollywood Strip, Hollywood Boulevard, and on Sunset. And I heard about this new bar that was opening up called the Hollywood Palace. So I applied for it. And they actually had a written test, if you could believe it. And it was interesting. So I took the written test. I did well, how do you make a whiskey sour, whatever it was, And then I was definitely the shortest bartender behind the bar. But, and that's why they made me the mez, which is another story. But a week before, I was waiting on tables. I didn't even have a bartending job. And then a week before, and then when I got the job, it was incredible. One thing that happened a week before, actually, was my friend Dale, who's the motorcycle guy remember there was a guy that came up to you on a motorcycle on Sunset Boulevard?
I remember.
And,
I'll never forget it.
My friend Dale, he was having an argument with his girlfriend while he was making a pasta. He was making a sauce. And Dale was, he was half German and half Italian. And the Italian part, his mother was Italian, so he used to make, he made a great pasta sauce. So he's cutting up on a chopping block with the sharpest knife you could imagine, right? So he's chopping up onions and sausage and all this stuff. And his girlfriend and him had a very volatile relationship. So they start getting into a fight. He takes the knife, and he just takes the knife and puts it right into the chopping block, and his hand slips. And he cuts the tendons in these 3 fingers. Now, Dale was an artist. He was a drummer. He's also the person that introduced me to Betty Garrett, to Jeff Bridges, to Bo Bridges, to everyone, to Carol O'Connor. I met so many people. Meredith, Lee Merriweather, who was an actress who was also, I believe, Miss America. I met all these people through Dale. And instead, this happened a week before the Hollywood Palace opened up. He could have gotten surgery to reconnect these tendons, but he would have to miss opening night at the Palace. He decided that to work at the Palace was more important than connecting the tendons in his hand. That's how big. The Hollywood Palace was like Studio 54 in New York. That's how big it was. We had Playboy parties. We had Men at Work. We had Culture Club. We had Stevie Wonder. We had Prince several times. The movie Against All Odds was shot there. Anyway, I got the job there, and it was incredible. Wore a tuxedo shirt with the bow tie, and you came to visit a couple of times.
No, with me, I'm a dreamer. And
Right.
at that time also, I was a dreamer. To me,
Yeah, it's 30 years ago, by the way.
All
Right,
right,
35 years
all
ago,
right.
33 years ago.
To me, it can never happen.
Right.
But it happened. And when we got there, we saw Hollywood and Vine. Then we saw the Palace. Right almost there was a drugstore, whatever,
Yeah.
and then came the Palace.
Right.
And I'm saying, wow, look at this.
But Dad, as much as you say that, I know you really wanted me to come back home. I mean, but
well, wait a minute.
yes.
How do we had to come to see you?
Right.
We have to come to see you.
Yeah, but it was amazing.
And maybe I even thought, if you're going to be working here, you'll never come home.
Right.
Who would want to come?
I mean, it was paradise. The place, it was beautiful weather, beautiful people. The club that I worked in, there were 2,500 people, and half of them were gorgeous girls between the ages of 18 and 23. I mean, it's like, it was like unbelievable. It was like paradise.
I'm positive. Again, this is like you say, so many years back, and I told Mom, he'll never come back.
Right.
Why should he come back? Look at this place over here, and he likes it there, and he has his own place. They
And I had friends.
Not the Wiz. You were the what were
The
you?
Mez, it was
the
called.
Mez.
Yeah, well, it was called the Mez because, unfortunately, for opening night, I was the shortest guy, again, the shortest bartender, and they had something that looked like a closet that was reconverted into a service bar. And for opening night for Tina Turner, they put me into that service bar. And I'll tell you, it was the most demeaning thing. And I felt really unbelievably terrible about it. And I didn't serve any customers other than the cocktail waitresses. And I just thought that this wasn't fair. So anyway, I wound up going from being the Mez, because it was the mezzanine level where the bar was, to becoming the #1 bartender at the Hollywood Palace and having the biggest station at the Hollywood Palace. And I did that really with the help. I had, there was my barback, Scott, basically, and Tim, those two guys, and a guy named Keith too. Those three barbacks assisted me in becoming the #1 bartender at the Hollywood Palace during a specific time. I would say for 2 or 3 years, I was the #1 bartender at the Hollywood Palace.
Again, and that's why we were lucky, Mom and I. Why? Because your situation made it that people were with you, helping you, doing this. And Mom and I were watching.
And the other thing I did, which was smart, I became friends with the owners of the club.
That's right.
Beverly and Dennis. And Dennis was, he was a graphic artist, and he made the American, a few, I don't know how many of them, but a few of the album covers for the American album covers for the Beatles. So he made a lot of money. The Hollywood sign, he donated, I think, $50,000 or $100,000 for the D in the Hollywood sign, the renovation. And he and I got along very well, and his wife and I got along very well. And I think I was like one of the only college guys that was a bartender over there. So they trusted me. I was a good bartender, and it was a wonderful experience.
When we came to visit you, well, you said, I think you
Dennis? I introduced you to Dennis and to Beverly.
And the way he talked to us about you, Alan.
He and I got along very well. He really appreciated me, and he trusted me. Why? Because I rang the most, I sold the most booze, and my register was always correct, So it wasn't off. And if it was off by change. It was never off by dollars. So it was, and we're talking about $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a night. So how could you not like someone like that, right? It was amazing. And that was just one register. We had 7 registers at the Hollywood Palace, plus the door.
And here I am with Mom.
Yeah.
We even went to a place, Tarzana.
That was the first place I lived. Actually, that was the first place I moved into. I'd come down from San Francisco because I was living in Northern California. I'd worked on The Right Stuff and a movie called Forbidden Love with Yvette Mimeo and Andrew Stevens. And I came down, and the first place I lived was actually on Barham Boulevard in Burbank, California, with my friend Rodney Franklin, and he was recording an album for Columbia Records, and it was right across the street from Universal Studios. And I'd come down because my friend Steve Cohen, who's probably the most important person, who's, you know, that he was the critical person that got me to come to Hollywood. He got me on Cagney and Lacey. He got me in the movie The Twilight Zone, and that was the first thing. I'd worked in The Twilight Zone at Universal Studios, playing a Nazi guard, and he was a Nazi guard. And we got to meet everybody. We met Vic Morrow right before he died. And I've talked about that on the show. But anyway, I lived at the Oakwood Apartments for a few months, and then I had to move out. So I wound up getting an apartment in Tarzana. The day I was getting the apartment, there was a girl being wheeled out on a gurney with a needle in her mouth, I think it was somewhere, but had a bullet hole in her head. And that's where I moved. I moved to Tarzana. Some kids were playing with a gun, and they killed this beautiful girl. And that was the day that I moved into Tarzana. Anyway, so that was my introduction to Tarzana. I lived there for a little while. This was before I worked at the Hollywood Palace. So I started working. I forgot the name of the road, but there's it starts with a V, and I can't think of it. Of Van Nuys Boulevard. On Van Nuys Boulevard, that goes all the way from Tarzana all the way down. It's parallel to 101, which is the Hollywood Freeway. So I worked in an Italian restaurant where I did actually making like cooking on the side of the table, you know, doing all kinds of weird things. And I said, yeah, I don't want to be a waiter, and it was too much work. And and then I found out about the Palace, and then once I got the Palace, I couldn't live in Tarzana because it was such a schlep. I don't think I had a car at that point. You brought me the car. I had no car. So what I did was I moved into a motor lodge that was on Vine Street, which was a block away from Hollywood Boulevard. I'm a block away from the Palace. Now what it was Hollywood Boulevard, Yucca, and then the highway. So the Hollywood Palace was between Hollywood Boulevard and Yucca on Vine Street. This was on Yucca and the highway, this motor lodge, and it was the worst place in the world, but for $300 or $400 a month, I could get a room and I could just walk to the Palace. And that's where I lived when I first got there, and it was miserable. I mean, the noise, the drug addicts, all kinds of, it was a terrible place to live, but it was right across the street from the Palace. Then later, I got this apartment on Franklin, and that was the best. And it was with all these actors and actresses. It was really like a rooming house, but I had my own kitchen, I had my own bathroom, and this was a studio apartment, and that was really my first apartment that I had. And I stayed there for a couple of years, and it was a nice first spot. It was great.
So now I don't remember.
Yes.
It can be from one to the other, but it didn't happen from the Palace to Cagney and Lacey.
Oh yeah, Cagney and Lacey I got through, again, Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen got me The Twilight Zone. Then he introduced me to the casting directors of Cagney and Lacey. I could have been in Spinal Tap, which is an unbelievable, iconic film, but because I had commitment to Cagney and Lacey, I couldn't be in this movie that now, like, everyone worships. You know, it's like this unbelievable movie. But he also got me in a bunch of other stuff. I mean, he also, with the casting directors, I used to play poker with them. They used to come to the Hollywood Palace. I became really good friends with these people. I never charged them for a drink at the Palace. And as a result, I'd go on, they'd send me on auditions for commercials. I got an Hitachi commercial when I was out in Hollywood. And even the audition process of going to auditions and seeing faces that you've seen on TV and in the movies, you're going up against them for the commercials or the part. Even that was an experience. I mean, there was a guy named, there used to be a television show called F Troop. And there was the Bugler on F Troop. It was about these Indians and a fort, they had this fort, and it was a comedy. And one of the guys was a bugler. And the guy who was the bugler on F Troop, he played the character Dobbs. He and I were up against for the same commercial. And I used to watch, I mean, it was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like, it's like kind of dream come true. It was pretty awesome.
I think I remember a show like that about the Indians.
Right. They were called the Hikawis. And they were very silly Indians. And they were all corrupt. Everybody was making... And it was O'Rourke, Sergeant O'Rourke. And it was all these, it was really fun. It was a funny show, F Troop.
But living there was a hectic life, huh?
I was young.
I know, I was young. How long ago were you?
It was there in 1982. Went to California in 81, and I stayed in Hollywood until the end of 87, beginning of 88. So, but it was interesting. I met so many people. I mean, even you met people when we would go, we'd go to the post office and you'd meet actors that you see,
Unbelievable.
you just walk down the street.
You walk down the street, and there's a guy standing right.
unbelievable.
And again, why? Who are they? Ordinary people.
Right. They have to go shopping.
That's right. I think you're the one. What are you looking? They're ordinary people.
I mean, there was this guy that used to be on Quincy, and his name is Val Bizzaglia. An interesting guy. He owned a restaurant on the show, but he was also John Travolta's father in Staying Alive. He was literally like, he lived next door to me. Mm-hmm. And I used to see Val all the time. Just the nicest guy in the world. We'd talk all the time. Just a sweetheart. But yet, he lived in the same rundown block. I mean, I also saw the son on the Jeffersons, the kid that played the son. He used to go out with a girl that lived around the corner from where I lived. So I'd see him driving really like an old Cadillac, but I'm talking about like, it wasn't even vintage. It looked crappy, but he'd always go there and I'd say hello to him, we'd talk. And it was nuts. It was, it's a different reality. And even when we went back with Wendy, my wife, and my 2 kids, we went back to Hollywood, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And we went to the Mayfair Market, which is the market that I used to go to when I lived. It was right down the block on Franklin where I used to live. And I wanted to go there just in case I'd bump into stars, because I'd see Michael Constantine from Room 222, and I'd see all these other stars there all the time. And I go there, and a guy named Michael Fairman comes in. Now, who's Michael Fairman? He played like the inspector on Cagney and Lacey. So we had this long conversation, and I remember one thing, and I went up to him, I said, "You were on Cagney and Lacey," and I'm doing this in front of Aaron, right? He said, yes. I said, I forgot your name. He says, Michael Fairman. I said, I remember a conversation I had with you. I said, you had told me that when you knew that, I told you that I was from the Bronx. And he said, oh, my son went to a high school in the Bronx. And I said, was it the Bronx High School of Science? And he said, yes. He said, how did you know? I said, because no one would say any other high school in the Bronx that their son went to. They wouldn't brag about any other high school in the Bronx. And he remembered, I don't know if he remembered the story, but he knew that I knew who he was and that we had a relationship. So, I mean, everyone was accessible. And it was right across the street from Dianetics. I forgot the name, what they call it, I forgot the name of it, but it's a religion that John Travolta belongs to.
Now, I remember that.
Right.
First of all, at that time, we thought it was the devil.
I think you're right.
No, seriously.
Right.
Weird. It wasn't called. It was another name for it.
I remember one of the books was Dianetics. I can't. Anyone in the control room now? But anyway, I forgot the name of who belongs to it. Tom Cruise, John Travolta, all these people, they belong to it. And I think they taught the religion is based on like aliens came to the earth. L. Ron Hubbard was the person
that's right.
who created it. But that was right across the street from the Mayfair Market. And it was interesting. It was just interesting.
The whole area, that whole small area,
right.
That's where the joint was jumping.
I know, and it was right near Gower. Now, what's Gower? Gower was Gower Studios, right down the block. And I worked in, Francis Ford Coppola's studio and some projects. I worked with Pee Wee Herman. Pee Wee Herman was a friend, before he became weird. He was weird then too, kind of, but not the same way. I was friends with all kinds of interesting people. But, again, Jeff Bridges, and through Dale. And really, I guess I met a lot of interesting people at the Hollywood Palace, but Dale was like one of my best friends. And through Dale, he opened up a world that was also unbelievable. I mean, just to hang out in the theater, you remember Hogan's Heroes television show, right? One of the guys that was one of the Nazis on Hogan's Heroes was part of a theater company called Theater West, which was also on Van Nuys, but it was in North Hollywood. And that's where he used to take the tickets. And he was one of the generals on Hogan's Heroes. That's where I saw Lee Merriweather. I met all the Bridges, the entire Bridges clan, Carol O'Connor. They all came to these theaters. Why? To see Betty Garrett do her one-woman show and other shows that they did. It was just an incredible experience.
And at that time, frankly, all those young actors and actresses, they were compared to the eventually later, they were the ones that built up Hollywood.
But I'll tell you, most of the people that I worked with who were trying to become actors, none of them are very. I only know one or two people who actually were able to make a living doing acting. I'm talking about people my age. I mean, I used to see the people who were the real actors. I mean, people who were established actors. But the people who came out to Hollywood, very few of them were able to make a living acting. And it was interesting. And a lot of the people who I was friends with in Hollywood, never got married. They're doing basically the same thing they did when I left 30 years ago or 35 years ago. They're basically, they never achieved. They're happy, I guess, but they never. I think maybe to a certain extent, the Hollywood Palace was, the best they ever did.
I don't even want to. But I'll say it because it had one of the worst things. I think going along Hollywood Boulevard,
Right.
to me, the most saint. There wasn't a better place to live, and it's a long street up to the Chinese. I think it's even
Grauman's Chinese Theater.
What do you notice? I noticed them, but people, young people, good people, begging.
Right.
They were begging.
Well, they were doing all kinds of things. I mean, there was unbelievable drug use, especially during that time.
They were.
And the other thing that was big, and again, the AIDS epidemic started in the 80s, and that's when I was in Hollywood, and it really hit hard at the Hollywood Palace. Hit very hard at the Hollywood Palace.
No,
we lost a lot of people.
I know those. And who were those people? Wonderful people.
Oh, yeah.
Who wanted to come and become a star.
Right. No, but you know what? We had a catering. We had a group of people, and I worked with them. I was their bartender. But I would say everybody except for me in that catering group were gay. And everyone died. First one person got AIDS, and they were all in their 20s. And the worst part was, and then, I bartended Buddy Rich's funeral, okay? And how did I get that? Because I was part of this, they liked me, so they brought me along. And we bartended it at Joanne Carson's house, who was Johnny Carson's wife. And we changed in the room where Truman Capote died, because Johnny Carson and Truman Capote were really good friends. And when he got sick and was dying, they kept him in this one room. That's where we changed, for the party, and everybody was there. I mean, we had unbelievable artists there, and everyone died, every single one of them. And what would happen is, as one person got sick, they would start smoking more cigarettes, drinking more, taking more drugs, whatever it was, because they knew there was no hope. And then one by one, it was like a domino. It was like dominoes, and they all died.
Mama and I, when we walked up to Grumman, and that's how we noticed it. Again, when we told you this is what, she almost cried. Yeah. Why? Young. Right. They were younger than we were. They were,
and they were, they all were beautiful. And the thing was,
and their beauty.
They were all beautiful people, but they were discouraged, and they couldn't go back home. They had left home.
They couldn't go back home, Alan.
And that was the sadness of it. And a lot of them didn't come back home.
Definitely.
One good friend of mine, I won't mention his name, but he was beaten up, and they broke his face, bones in his face and his eyes. He was the only person that came home, and he was nursed back to life basically by a woman who he eventually married and had kids with. But everybody else that I knew out there, none of them went home. They just stayed there, and they just stayed in a state of limbo. They never really did anything. It's sad.
And yet in the East, come to California, come to Hollywood.
Well, I had the greatest time of my life.
All right.
Right? But I also came home.
All right, but before you came home. But come to California, and they come to
Well, the thing is, you go to California. It even happened to me. I went. I was looking for an agent, right? I go to this guy's office. He says, "Take off your shirt." And I'm thinking, because he wants to see. He's saying he wants to see if I got a six-pack, and it's like, you wind up being a piece of meat. They're looking at you like, who knows why he wanted me to take off my shirt. So that's what you deal with Hollywood. You're dealing with basically people who are predators.
That's a good word, Alan. I don't.
They're predators
That's the word.
on people with dreams that come to Hollywood. And it happens in New York too. I mean,
Oh.
it happens everywhere.
You're a poet,
And I know it. That's it. But it's
Alan. See there in this talk,
Yeah.
you're coming out with statements that really.
but it really happened. And but then there was also Steve Cohen. And again, Steve Cohen was my hero. Steve Cohen introduced me to Joey Pantoliano. Steve Cohen, gave me my first speaking part in a movie. I mean, Steve Cohen he brought me to Hollywood. He gave me Cagney and Lacey. I mean, this guy was like the ultimate friend. And we saw what was it called? Rambo Part 2 together in the movies. I'll never forget it. But he was great. I introduced him to Rodney Franklin. He was a Rodney Franklin fan. Rodney Franklin was my cousin Jonathan, your cousin Jonathan's, or whatever he is. He's your cousin Jonathan too. Jonathan played percussion with Rodney Franklin. Rodney Franklin, is an unbelievable jazz pianist. So, I mean, we became good friends, Steve and I. And then, as a result of that, he introduced me to he introduced me to Hollywood. He introduced me to Beverly Hills. But it wasn't, but I had to come back home. That's the whole thing, because I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to settle down. And Mom knew it, and it was because of Mom that I came home. But it wasn't just that. I just knew that my time at Hollywood, if you stay in Hollywood too long,
No,
you're going to burn out.
now that you said it, I mean, it wouldn't occur to me,
Yeah.
but you're right. Instead of coming home early, if you stay there longer, you're finished.
But you know what? It's probably better to stay there, because if I had left earlier, I would have kicked myself saying, maybe I could have done better. Maybe I could have done this. But by the time I left, I had lost Cagney and Lacey. I didn't have the greatest relationship with the Palace anymore. It had changed a little bit. And things were not that good anymore,
All right.
And I was also thinking, I got to finish. I have one semester left of college. I left in my last semester, so I came back and finished up college.
All right.
And I came back with a plan that I fulfilled. I've got a family, and I have a job.
No, that for us,
Yeah.
for Mom and for me, that was the beginning of a wonderful, wonderful time.
I know it was good. And just look at me. Look at Aaron. Look at Kara. Look at Wendy. I mean, look at what we put together. And we have this. Now I could really appreciate this show. I could. And I will mention Felix, because I forgot to mention him, and Brian, and Dina, and Matt, and Andrew, and Abby, and Christina's in the back too. And I mean, this is a great life.
And I'm glad you have it, Alan. You deserve it.
I know. I know you're glad I have it, because you could have it too, because you're on the show too.
No, again, a life I never expected. This type of a life, but I think I was satisfied with. First of all, I was always with Mom,
Yeah.
and I think we were satisfied for the way we were living.
Right.
We lived again, and how all right. We talked because of whatever
lived
happened.
below your means.
Whatever happened.
Right. We did everything for the children.
And from World War II, we have been able to do this and do this and this.
Right.
And life after that.
Life after that? You know what life after that is? That's the last thing you're going to say. You know why? Because there's only one thing left to say. That's a wrap. Good night, folks.